The Nebula Awards are voted on by writers, the people who shape science fiction and fantasy itself. I read every Nebula Award winning book for Best Novel from the 1970s, so which ones still hold up and which ones are better left in the past. I'm going to give a quick review of each book with my thoughts with no spoilers. The majority of the books this decade won both the Hugo and the Nebula, and I've already done a video reviewing all the Hugo winners. So for books I've covered before, I'm going to try to keep my reviews a bit shorter, starting with Ringworld by Larry Niven. So this won both the Hugo and the Nebula. It's set in a far-flung future where space travel is common, and humanity is no longer alone in the universe. Two alien species join our human protagonists, Louis Wu and Tila Brown, on an expedition to investigate the Ringworld, which is this massive artificial ring-shaped structure that was built to support life. Humanity has had some conflict with both of these alien species, so there's a bit of tension and some hidden agendas within the team-up. The aliens in the Ringworld themselves are definitely the strongest parts of the book. The human characters, on the other hand, are probably the weakest. They feel a bit shallow and don't really balance each other out. So the two humans are Louis Wu, a 200-year-old veteran traveler with tons of experience, and then Tila Brown, a 20-year-old woman whose defining trait is her luck. The logic behind bringing Tila along is that her luck will somehow keep the people around her safe. But really, Tila is basically there to be rescued by Louis, and then by making luck her defining trait, the story kind of strips away her agency. And then the other problem with the book is that while it spends a lot of time on world building and trying to establish the dynamic between humans and aliens, it never fully made me care about the characters or the journey, and the book really never capitalized on the world building it does establish. There are a few other books in the series, so maybe it's just build up for those. But honestly, I think the story just lacks a strong antagonist or enough tension to keep the plot engaging, which in turn makes the resolution feel pretty flat. And by the time you finish it, the ending feels underwhelming because you expect to learn a lot more details about the Ringworld and the mystery surrounding it. You do get some answers and details, but the majority of the book can basically be summarized as a group of humans and aliens exploring a world while arguing with each other. For a modern reader, much of the book feels dated, especially in its portrayal of female characters. I can see why it won a lot of awards, but I just don't think it's aged that well. 1971, A Time of Changes by Robert Silverberg. The novel is set in a future human colony world where individual identity is heavily suppressed. In this society, people are discouraged from using personal pronouns like I or me, because expressing a strong sense of self is considered dangerous and socially disruptive. Instead, citizens are expected to share their feelings with only a small circle of people. And then there are also institutions that resemble Catholic confessionals, where people go to voice their sins and frustrations. Those who reject the status quo are either killed or become outcasts in the world. The story follows Duravel, a man who takes illegal drugs that radically shift his outlook on life, and eventually becomes both a drug dealer and kind of a burnout, which in turn pulls him into more dangerous situations. Most of the novel centers on Duravel himself and his personal struggles. Most of the book is written in a journal-like form, as if our main character is writing directly to the reader. The writing style and the themes actually stand up pretty well. Silverberg largely takes a neutral position, suggesting that drugs aren't inherently good or bad. Instead, the novel reads more as a critique of culture. If a collectivist, repressive society is truly superior to one centered on individualism, then why are people within it still dissatisfied with life and turning to drugs as an escape? I think the biggest drawback for me is there's a reoccurring subplot involving our main character and premature ejaculation, mostly during encounters with prostitutes, and there are probably 4 or 5 scenes where this comes up. And it seems likely that this is meant to symbolize our main character's inability to fully express himself within this repressive society. And you see that he is able to work on the issue as he develops a stronger sense of self. But nobody really wants to read about that. And it feels kind of like the book wants to engage with the countercultural ideas of the 1960s, but really doesn't move beyond the basic points that repressive societies can be harmful and that drugs can have both a positive and negative effect. I think it's a fairly skippable read. So 1972, The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. It's divided into 3 parts. Part 1 revolves around humanity discovering a source of unlimited energy from a parallel world. A human scientist begins to realize that this free energy may have dangerous consequences and sets out to uncover the truth. Part 2 takes place in the parallel world and focuses on its alien inhabitants. And then part 3 returns to humanity, bringing the story full circle and tying the plot together. So parts 1 and 3 feature strong, hard sci-fi elements and also highlight the darker side of the academic world. Not all scientific research is driven by pure curiosity. Some of it is shaped or manipulated to support specific viewpoints or allow certain industries to maintain power. And this also reflects how people often prioritize short-term benefits without fully considering long-term consequences. Part 2 is what really makes the book a classic. In a lot of sci-fi stories, aliens are basically just reskinned humans. Maybe they look a little bit different. In this book, Asimov makes the aliens feel really alien by exploring their biology and their behavior rather than just making their appearance a little bit different. If you're interested in a truly strange and imaginative alien life, I highly recommend it. It's a classic for a reason. 1973, Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. The story follows a team of astronauts exploring a massive, mysterious alien ship. There is no real antagonist or traditional plot. The main characters are simply trying to understand the alien spacecraft, and that's the story. Clarke does a good job of making the story feel like a detailed scientific adventure. There's a good balance of discovery and uncertainty that just makes the expedition feel realistic. If you've never read a Big Dumb Object novel, I'd recommend giving one a try. A BDO or Big Dumb Object story is usually one that has less focus on character-driven drama and more centered around exploring the mystery of some kind of large structure. Overall, I think it's a pretty approachable sci-fi book, and it holds up fairly well. 1974, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. The book follows Shevek, a scientist living on a harsh colonized moon where people live in a society without private property or formal government. Seeking intellectual freedom and a way to share his scientific work, he travels to the planet his moon orbits, which is a wealthy capitalist world that is far more materialistic, but it's also a world with a lot more inequality and is rife with political tension. As Shevek moves between worlds and societies, he begins to question the ideals of each, realizing that neither system is truly perfect, and the novel ultimately explores the tensions between freedom, responsibility, and the limits of utopian thinking. This was written during the Cold War, and the story can feel like an allegory for US capitalism versus Soviet socialism, but it isn't a direct one-to-one comparison. It's a dense novel that doesn't tell the reader what to think, but instead challenges them to consider the strengths and flaws of different political and social systems. It's a book I highly recommend. 1975, The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. Humans are at war with an alien species. Our main protagonist is William Mandela. He's a conscript that is forced to fight and is sent to various planets to engage the enemy. Due to time dilation, each military tour lasts only months for him, but decades pass on Earth. The first half is basically Vietnam with the space opera backdrop, and then the second half focuses a bit more on time dilation in order to give readers a glimpse of how humans evolve over the course of the war. The book was inspired by Haldeman's experiences as a Vietnam veteran, and it gives a realistic picture of war. Combat alienates soldiers from civilian life, and the more they fight, the harder it is to reintegrate. Returning soldiers often feel like they don't recognize home, and then time dilation is used effectively to highlight this point. The book, in my opinion, is best read after Starship Troopers because it feels like an inverse of that book in so many ways. There are some parts of the book that haven't aged very well, but I found it to be more humorous than anything else. Overall, it's a book I would recommend. 1976, Man Plus by Frederik Pohl. The book is set in a future where humanity faces extinction through war. To survive, Earth launches a project to transform humans into cyborgs capable of living on Mars. The story follows Roger Torway, a man chosen to undergo the cybernetic surgery that will allow him to survive the Martian environment. As experiments begin, Roger begins to lose his humanity both physically and psychologically, and the novel explores themes of identity, humanity, and the cost of technological progress. Of course, a lot of these themes are overshadowed by the dated tech a bit of sexism, and the general plot itself. It felt like Pohl became overly focused on making Roger's life as miserable as possible, to the point it came across as more sadistic than necessary. And in that process, he didn't quite figure out how he wanted to conclude the story. It honestly feels more like this book is from the 1950s rather than the 70s. The book is pretty weak overall. I would say it's the weakest of this decade. 1977, Gateway by Frederik Pohl. The story is set in the future where humanity discovers an alien spaceport called Gateway. The spaceport is filled with thousands of mysterious spacecraft left by a long-vanished race. The ships travel along pre-programmed routes, but humans don't fully understand how they work. They just have to get on and see where they go. There are 3 possible outcomes to this: riches, nothing of importance, or death. People take the risk not knowing if they're going to become extremely wealthy or they're going to die. The story follows Rob and his life on Gateway. The novel alternates between his present therapy sessions with an AI therapist and events that happened in his past. Most of the book is about the psychological impact of risking your life for wealth. I did enjoy the reveal at the end as you learn Rob's history and what happened to him, but I will say my dislike of him overshadowed what I did enjoy. I think it's a pretty solid book, I just don't think it was for me. 1978, Dreamsnake by Vonda McIntyre. It's set in a post-apocalyptic world. The novel centers around a woman named Snake who uses snakes to heal people. The snakes are bred and engineered to produce vaccines and antibodies when exposed to sick people. The plot is pretty simple. Snake, our protagonist, loses her alien Dreamsnake while she is trying to help heal someone, and then the story follows her quest to find another. Along the way, she helps downtrodden characters and must avoid being killed by dangerous foes. A pretty standard adventure. So alien snakes that are bred and engineered to produce vaccines and antibodies through their venom is a pretty cool concept. Where the book really falls apart, I think, is just the general world building. In most strong post-apocalyptic novels, the world is highly dangerous and characters only travel when absolutely necessary. Here in this post-apocalyptic setting, an organization sends out women healers to travel alone and treat strangers using their alien snakes. You never really get a clear explanation of why this organization exists or why they operate this way. In practice, it feels like a pretty implausible system that would fail pretty quickly. And everything that happens to the protagonist isn't really surprising because she's effectively set up to fail. The book was probably progressive for its time, but it just kind of comes across as fairly mediocre. 1979, The Fountains of Paradise by Arthur C. Clarke. It centers on our protagonist Morgan and his efforts to build a space elevator on a sacred mountain, which is basically in Sri Lanka. This brings Morgan into conflict with religious traditions and local politics. The story alternates between the present-day struggle to build the elevator and then a storyline about an ancient king who once built a pleasure palace atop the same mountain. Essentially, you're reading about 2 massive engineering projects, each pushing the limits of what's possible at the time. Really, this book is about an elevator that goes to space. It's just a bit boring, especially if you've read Clarke's other books and are going in with higher expectations. It's not a bad book, but I do think Clarke's reputation may carry the book, where if this was by another author, I don't think it would be read nearly as much. So which books do I think have held up and are worth reading? Ringworld and A Time of Changes kind of have shown their age in terms of just how the women were depicted and treated in the story. Ringworld, overall, it was just underwhelming, and A Time of Changes still has some pretty relevant themes, but the subplot with the main character and his potency problems are not going to be for everybody, so I think both of these are fairly skippable. For Pohl, it seems like he hates his main characters because he makes awful things happen to them. Man Plus, the entire situation was just a bit sad, and the ending was not any good at all. Gateway, the main character was a bit of a prick, so I don't feel as bad for him, and the ending was done pretty well. I think out of the 2, Gateway is definitely better. Rendezvous with Rama and the Gods themselves are classic sci-fi books that hold up. One does a good job of writing about weird aliens, and then the other does a good job of people exploring an alien ship. Dreamsnake and The Fountains of Paradise have interesting setups, But honestly, I just think the plot and characters were a bit bland. I just don't think there's anything really special about them. The Dispossessed and the Forever War are really the only books this decade that felt like they had a decent plot, characters, and world building. Overall, these are the books that I think have held up. If you agree or disagree, please let me know in the comments below. I'm planning on reading all the Nebula Award winners for Best Novel, so if you would like to follow along, please like and subscribe.